Scotland has around 3,000 castles. Most of them are photographs. You pull over on a road somewhere in the Highlands, take a picture through the car window, and drive on. The castle sits there in the rain, roofless, empty, slowly returning to the ground it came from. A ruin, with a tourist board beside it, explaining what it used to be. But some of them, and this is the part that most people hear without actually processing, are someone's home. Right now, this morning. Not a hotel, not a holiday let, not a museum with a gift shop and a car park. A home where someone woke up, made coffee, and walked through a corridor that was already centuries old when their great-great-grandparents were born. Scotland has more continuously occupied ancient castles than almost anywhere else in the world, and the families inside them are not living there because it is comfortable or convenient. They are living there because they decided, generation after generation, that the building mattered more than the alternative. More than money, more than modern life, more than every sensible reason to leave. 10 castles, 10 families. Some of these chains of occupation stretch back over 800 years. By the time we reach entry 1, the idea that a house should ever be empty is going to feel like something worth questioning. Entry 10. Castle Stalker, Argyll. On the west coast of Scotland, about 20 miles north of Oban, there is a 4-story tower house sitting on a small tidal island in Loch Leich. When the tide is low, the rocky islet emerges from the water, and the castle stands on wet stone. When the tide is high, it appears to float. There is no road to it, no bridge, no causeway. The only way in is by boat. Castle Stalker was built in the 15th century by the Stuart clan, who were lords of Lorne at the time. It is privately owned today by the Stuart family. The same clan, recovered after a gap that involved one of the more embarrassing transactions in Scottish castle history. Around 1620, the 7th Stuart chief, a man named Duncan, lost Castle Stalker in a drunken wager. He traded it to the Campbells of Airds in exchange for an 8-oared boat. Not gold, not land, a boat. The Campbells held it for nearly 3 centuries before the Stuarts bought it back in 1908. Lieutenant Colonel D.R. Stuart Allwood acquired it again in 1965 and spent years restoring it stone by stone. The castle is visible every day from the A828 road. Tourists stop at a lay-by and photograph it constantly. You may have already seen it without knowing what it was. It appeared in Monty Python and the Holy Grail in 1975 as Castle Ars, the final scene of the film. That scene was filmed looking out from this exact stretch of Scottish coastline. The trade-off for living here is simple and absolute. Your front door requires a boat. There is no other option. At certain tides, there is no option at all. Entry 9. Ferniehurst Castle, Scottish borders. 1.5 miles south of Jedburgh. Set back from the Jed Water, Ferniehurst Castle has been the ancestral seat of the Kerr family since 1476. The Marquis of Lothian, a Kerr, still holds it today. That is 550 years of the same family on the same ground. What makes Ferniehurst unusual among castles is not its age, but its record of destruction. This castle has been sacked, burned, and rebuilt so many times that its survival feels less like heritage and more like stubbornness. The English sacked it in 1523. In 1549, Scottish and French troops under the command of Jean de Bogue fought to retake it. They succeeded. Over 130 English soldiers were executed after the castle fell. The English came back in 1570 and took it again. Then, in 1593, King James VI partially demolished it, not because of a foreign enemy, but because the Kerrs had sheltered the rebellious Earl of Bothwell inside its walls. Every time this castle was destroyed, the Kerrs rebuilt it on the same foundation in the same place. There is an architectural detail inside Ferniehurst that visitors still notice. The main staircase spirals in the opposite direction to almost every other castle in Scotland. Standard defensive staircases spiral clockwise, giving a right-handed swordsman the advantage when defending from above. The Ferniehurst staircase spirals anti-clockwise. The clan tradition holds that after the Battle of Flodden in 1513, Sir Andrew Kerr, who was left-handed, trained his men to fight with their left hands. The staircase was built to give them the defensive edge. Historians have never been able to verify the left-handedness claim. What is confirmed is the staircase. It spirals the wrong way. It has done so for centuries. The Kerrs rebuilt this castle 4 times and kept the staircase every time. Entry 8. Dunrobin Castle, Sutherland. On the east coast of the Scottish Highlands, overlooking the North Sea, Dunrobin Castle is the most northerly great house in Scotland. The Sutherland family have been here since the 13th century. It was first documented as their stronghold in 1401. The current owner is Alistair Sutherland, the 25th Earl of Sutherland. The building has 189 rooms, making it the largest house in the Northern Highlands. It also has its own railway station. What most people do not realize when they first see Dunrobin is that the castle they are looking at is not medieval in appearance. In 1845, the family hired Sir Charles Barry, the same architect who designed the Houses of Parliament in London, to completely remodel it. Barry gave it French Renaissance conical towers and formal gardens modelled on Versailles. The medieval keep is still in there, enclosed inside layers of later construction. You are looking at 800 years of one family's changing idea of what home should look like. Dunrobin has been a fortress, a naval hospital during the First World War, a boys' boarding school between 1965 and 1972, and a family home, all without ever leaving Sutherland ownership. The 25th Earl lives here now. The same line that held this ground in the 13th century holds it today. The thing about Dunrobin that no photograph communicates is the scale of the commitment it represents. 189 rooms do not get maintained by sentiment. Every generation of the Sutherland family has had to actively choose to stay and actively find ways to make that choice financially viable. They have been making that choice for 8 centuries. Entry 7. Inveraray Castle, Argyll. On the shores of Loch Fyne in Argyll, Inveraray Castle is the ancestral home of the Clan Campbell and the seat of the Dukes of Argyll. The 13th Duke of Argyll, Torquil Campbell, lives here now with his family in private apartments that occupy 2 floors between 2 of the 4 crenellated towers. The estate covers over 60,000 acres. Sir Duncan Campbell built the first castle at Inveraray in 1450. The current building was constructed under the 3rd Duke, completed in 1789, and designed by architects Roger Morris and William Adam. It replaced the original medieval structure and was one of the first Gothic revival buildings in Scotland. On the 5th of November 1975, bonfire night, fire broke out in the castle. The irony of the date was not lost on anyone. The 12th Duke and his family lived in the castle's basement while restoration work was completed. The family did not leave. They moved downstairs and waited. If Inveraray looks familiar to you from television, it appeared as Dunvegan Castle in the Christmas special of Downton Abbey. The current Duke has spoken publicly about the balance of running a historic family home that is also partly a working estate, partly a tourist attraction, and partly a television set. The private apartments where his family actually lives are not accessible to visitors. The rest of the castle is open to the public. The Campbells have held this ground for over 570 years. The fire in 1975 was the most serious threat to the building in centuries, and the family's response to it was to move into the basement and start planning the repairs. Entry 6. Cawdor Castle, Highland. 5 miles from Nairn in the Scottish Highlands, Cawdor Castle is one of the most visited castles in Scotland. The Campbell family, the Earls of Cawdor, have held it since the 16th century. Angelica Campbell, the Dowager Countess Cawdor, lives here now. The castle was built in the 14th century, and the story of its founding is one of the stranger documented origin legends in Scottish history. Stranger, because part of it has been scientifically verified. According to the castle's own recorded history, a Thane of Cawdor had a dream that he should load a donkey with gold, follow the donkey across the landscape, and build his castle wherever the animal chose to rest. The donkey stopped beneath a holly tree. The castle was built around it. The tree died, presumably from lack of sunlight inside the walls, and its petrified remains are still in the base of the old tower today. Visitors can see them. Radiocarbon dating of the wood confirmed the tree died around 1372. The castle was built around a living tree, and the proof of that tree is still there 6.5 centuries later. Now, the other thing people associate with Cawdor is Macbeth. Shakespeare made Macbeth the Thane of Cawdor in his play, written in 1606. The problem with that association is that the historical King Macbeth took the Scottish throne in 1040 and died at the Battle of Lumphanan in 1057. This castle did not exist until the 14th century, approximately 300 years after Macbeth's death. The literary connection is a complete anachronism. The castle has never hidden this fact. The gift shop sells it anyway. Entry 5. Blair Castle, Perthshire. In the village of Blair Athol, 35 miles northwest of Perth, Blair Castle has been the seat of the Murray family, the Dukes of Athol, for over 700 years. The original tower was built in 1269. The 13th Duke of Athol, Bruce Murray, is the current title holder. He is primarily based in South Africa but returns annually, and the family retains full residence rights over the castle. There is one fact about Blair Castle that has no equivalent anywhere else in Europe. The Duke of Athol commands a private army. The Athol Highlanders are a ceremonial infantry regiment of approximately 100 soldiers. They are not part of the British Armed Forces. They operate entirely under the Duke's command. Queen Victoria granted this right, following a visit to Blair Castle in 1844, making the Athol Highlanders the only legal private army on the European continent. They still parade. The Duke still inspects them. Blair Castle was besieged in 1746 during the Jacobite Rising. That siege holds the distinction of being the last castle siege in the entire history of the British Isles. Evidence from the bombardment is still visible in the structure today. In 1996, the 12th Duke placed Blair Castle into a charitable trust, permanently protecting it from inheritance tax. The family retained residential rights. The trust funds maintenance. The private army marches on. The legal structure that protects Blair Castle today is almost as medieval in its logic as the castle it protects. Entry 4. Kelburn Castle, North Ayrshire. 35 miles southwest of Glasgow, on the Firth of Clyde coast, Kelburn Castle holds a specific distinction that no other castle in Scotland can claim. It is the oldest building in Scotland to have been continuously inhabited by the same family. The Boyle family, the Earls of Glasgow, have been here since the 12th century. The original stone Norman keep dates to the 1200s. Sections of that 13th century keep are still in active use today. Patrick Boyle, the 10th Earl of Glasgow, lives here with his family. 900 years of the same bloodline in the same building. In 2007, a structural survey told the Earl that the concrete casing applied to the castle's exterior in the 1950s was deteriorating and needed to be removed. The Earl's children suggested an alternative to standard scaffolding and restoration. 4 Brazilian graffiti artists, part of the internationally renowned Os Gemios collective, were invited to Scotland. They spent 2 weeks in residence and emptied approximately 1,500 aerosol cans, painting the turrets and walls of a 900-year-old castle in vivid, surreal urban street art. Historic Scotland granted permission on the condition that the graffiti would eventually be removed and traditional restoration completed. In 2011, the Earl formally wrote to Historic Scotland requesting that the artwork be made permanent. The public response had been overwhelming. A street art expert ranked the project among the world's top 10 examples of street art that same year. The graffiti is still there. The concrete problem was solved. The 900-year-old family line solved a structural engineering challenge with spray paint, and the result is now a landmark. You can stand in front of Kelburn Castle and see 1,200-year-old stonework covered in Brazilian street art. Either that is the most offensive thing you can imagine doing to a medieval building, or it is proof that 900 years of continuous occupation requires creative problem-solving in every generation. The comments section on any post about this castle will tell you that people feel strongly about it either way. Entry 3. Glamis Castle, Angus. 12 miles north of Dundee, near the village of Glamis. This castle has been the home of the Lyon family, later the Bowes-Lyon family, since 1372, when Robert II of Scotland granted the property to Sir John Lyon, Thane of Glamis. That is 650 years of the same family. The current Earl of Strathmore and Kinghorn, Simon Bowes-Lyon, holds the title today. Glamis is the childhood home of Queen Elizabeth, the Queen Mother. On the 21st of August, 1930, on a stormy late summer night, Princess Margaret was born here by caesarean section, the first senior member of the British royal family to be born in Scotland in over 300 years. There is a story about Glamis Castle that has been circulating for over 150 years, and no member of the family has ever confirmed or denied it. The legend holds that somewhere inside the castle there is a hidden room, bricked up, inaccessible, containing a secret so disturbing that it is passed down to each earl only on his 21st birthday. Historians have never verified the room's existence. The Smithsonian Magazine covered the legend. Victorian newspapers debated it for decades. The family has never spoken publicly about it. What is documented, and what is considerably darker than any legend, is the story of Janet Douglas. In 1537, Lady Glamis was arrested on charges of plotting to poison King James V of Scotland. Historians widely consider the charges to have been fabricated. James V despised the Douglas family and used the prosecution as a mechanism to seize the castle. Janet Douglas was burned at the stake on the esplanade of Edinburgh Castle on the 17th of July, 1537. Her son was forced to watch. After the king died in 1542, the family recovered the castle. They have lived in it for 650 years since, alongside the legend of the bricked-up room and the documented reality of what was done to one of their own in 1537. Entry 2. Traquair House, Scottish borders. Approximately 7 miles southeast of Peebles, Traquair House is Scotland's oldest continuously inhabited house. It dates to 1107, when King Alexander I of Scotland signed a royal charter at the site. The Stuart family has lived here since 1491. Catherine Maxwell Stuart, the 21st Lady of Traquair, lives here now with her family. 27 Scottish kings and queens visited Traquair. Mary Queen of Scots stayed here in 1566 with her infant son, the future James VI. The cradle she used for the baby is still in the house. The bed she slept in is still in the house. These are not museum pieces. They are inside an occupied home. In 1738, the grand ceremonial entrance gates, stone bear statues on top, known as the Bear Gates, were installed at the end of the driveway. In 1745, Bonnie Prince Charlie passed through those gates on his way through the borders during the Jacobite Rising. The 5th Earl of Traquair closed the gates behind him and made a vow. They would not be opened again until a Stuart king sat on the throne of Scotland. The Stuart dynasty never returned to power. The Bear Gates have been closed for over 280 years. Everyone who enters Traquair, including the family that lives there, uses the side entrance. The main entrance to Scotland's oldest inhabited house has been sealed since before the United States existed as a country. In 1965, Peter Maxwell Stuart, the 20th Laird, discovered a brewery in the castle that had fallen into disuse in the 1880s. He restored it using the original 18th century equipment, including a copper kettle installed in 1739. Traquair ales are now exported worldwide. The brewery still operates on the original equipment, in the original space, inside a building that has been someone's home for over 900 years. The house is not frozen. It brews beer. It hosts events. It functions. Behind gates that will not open until a promise made in 1745 is kept, and everyone involved understands it never will be. Entry 1. Dunvegan Castle, Isle of Skye. On the shore of Loch Dunvegan on the Isle of Skye, Dunvegan Castle is the oldest continuously inhabited castle in Scotland, and one of the longest continuous family occupations of any building in the Western world. The MacLeod clan has lived here since the 13th century. Hugh Magnus MacLeod of MacLeod, the 30th chief of Clan MacLeod, has held the title since 2007. He lives here now. The ancestor of the clan was a man named Leod, the son of Olaf the Black, one of the last Norse kings of Man. Olaf died in 1265 when the Hebrides were ceded from Norway to Scotland. The family that holds Dunvegan today traces its direct line to a Viking king. Until 1748, there was no land entrance to Dunvegan Castle. The only way in was through the Sea Gate, a single entrance accessible by boat from the loch. The castle was designed so that anyone approaching on foot had no way in. The first landward door was added in 1748, but the Sea Gate still exists, and the architectural logic of a castle that could only be reached by water is still visible in the structure today. Inside Dunvegan Castle, in a glass display case, is a fragment of silk known as the fairy flag, am Bratach Syth in Gaelic. The fabric has been dated to between the 4th and 7th centuries AD. Analysis of the silk suggests it may have originated in Syria or Rhodes. It is therefore older than the castle by at least 600 years, and possibly much more. The clan legend holds that the flag was given to a MacLeod chief by his fairy wife, and that it can be unfurled 3 times to guarantee victory in battle, with 2 uses already spent, at the Battle of Glendale in 1490 and the Battle of the Spoiling of the Dyke in 1578. The MacLeods won both. Whether you consider that to be causation or coincidence depends entirely on your perspective. During the Second World War, young MacLeod clan members carried photographs of the fairy flag into combat. The clan chief at the time reportedly offered to bring the flag to the White Cliffs of Dover to repel a potential German invasion. Whether that offer was made in complete seriousness or as a gesture of defiance, it was made in the 20th century about a piece of silk from the 4th century, by the 30th generation of a family that has lived in the same castle since the 13th century. That is what continuity looks like when it is not a heritage concept, but a daily practice. The 5 acres of formal gardens were added in the 18th century. The loch stretches out in front. The Quillen Mountains rise behind. The castle receives visitors, but the family that has been here for 8 centuries still occupies it. The 30th chief lives here. The 31st will live here after him. The chain that started with a Viking king's son on the Isle of Skye has held for over 750 years. Scotland has around 3,000 castles. The overwhelming majority are empty shells, and the reason most of them are empty is not war, not fire, not neglect in the conventional sense. It is economics. The Highland clan system collapsed after Culloden in 1746. Inheritance taxes in the 20th century broke family after family. The modern world offered 100 reasons to leave and very few reasons to stay. The castles on this list survived because individual families made a specific choice in every generation, that the building came before convenience. Dunvegan, because the MacLeods never left. Traquair, because the Stuarts kept a vow that history made impossible to honor. Kelburn, because a 900-year-old family hired Brazilian graffiti artists. Glamis, because a family recovered a castle that a king had seized after executing one of their own, and then simply kept living there. No single mechanism explains all 10. The thread connecting them is not heritage policy or government protection or any formal preservation framework. It is personal stubbornness, repeated across generations, dressed up in different centuries and different circumstances. English Heritage and Historic Environment Scotland list thousands of protected buildings across these islands. Protection in law is one thing. A family that has made the same decision for 800 years is something else. If you have been inside one of these castles and felt something that the guidebook did not prepare you for, that particular quality of a building carrying the weight of everyone who lived in it before you, tell me in the comments. I want to know what the castle gave you that you did not expect. If this showed you something about Scotland that you did not have before, subscribe. Every week we go into the history that the surface-level content does not have time to sit with. This is the channel for people who want to understand what they are actually looking at.